We're just looking at one of Mac's easels here. It's quite a fine bit of kit. It's probably got some history in it. Anyway, we're in Mac Gregory's studio, and here's Mac. What about this easel, Mac?
Well, when I was a student at Chelsea Art School, excuse me, frog in my throat, the porter, a chap called Mac also, he said, I've got an easel, do you want to buy it? And now these are worth quite a lot of money, I think way over £1,000 now.
Really?
600 or 700.
What, because it's an antique?
Well, no, I mean, I don't know, but this is Victorian, I would think.
Right.
And could be Edwardian, but somewhere it's got details on it. But bits are missing, but then he said you can have it for 30 shillings, which to me was a king's ransom then, in 1960, would it be 1959? And so I carried it from Chelsea up to Fulham where my digs were, and I've had it ever since. And I use it virtually daily. I have this small one, which is a radial easel, which is a bit awkward. I thought it'd be space saving, but it isn't because the feet tend to trip me up. This is, I know where it is, so it's a much better easel.
And it's heavier down the bottom.
It is, yes, yes.
And you know, it's probably easier for it to move up and down.
Mm.
So what drives you then to you say you use it every day?
More or less, yeah.
Yeah, so what is it that drives you to... This is one thing I'm sort of getting to really, was what makes you continue every day to sort of produce?
Perhaps I can't think of anything else to do. I might be a bit simple really, and I've always enjoyed working. I mean, I can remember my mother, when I was 4 years old, used to draw, and I used to draw a lot as a child.
Yes.
And then my mother always had grand ideas for what I should do when I left school, and one was being a dentist, one was being working on ships, or say things like this, and I didn't want to be a dentist. But anyway, she said, well, if you get your matric, will you promise to be a dentist? So I was not thinking I would pass, not being terribly interested in school as such. I got my matric.
What is the matric?
Well, in the old days there used to be a thing called a school certificate, way before O-levels and all that. And you could take a minimum of 5 subjects. We all took 9 because we were in the A class, if you took 9 or 10 subjects. And the 5 basic subjects that you had to pass in, one was maths, one was English, one was a foreign language, and there were 2 others which could be history, geography or science or whatever. But if you failed in maths or English, you failed the whole exam. So you had to pass a minimum of 5 subjects. And if you reached a certain level in marking, then you got what they called exemption from the London matric, which was a higher thing, which was virtually a university entrance type thing.
Oh, right, okay.
So anyway, I got my matric, much to my surprise. So I went into the 6th form, and I thought, well, I'll do French and geography and English or art. But art was always looked down upon because only idiots did art. They either went to art school or into the church, you see. So anyway, my mother said, you promised to be a dentist. So I switched to the sciences, which I didn't particularly enjoy, but the science master was absolutely amazed that I got a credit in physics because I was always nearly bottom in physics. I suddenly realised how easy the exams were compared to the lessons we were doing at school. And
your brain must work that way then.
Yeah. If I've got one. Anyway, I eventually got an interview. I forget now. It was either St Thomas's or one of the dental colleges, but I never went for the interview. My father said, you've always been interested in art, and it was quite far-seeing really. So yes, he said, would you like to go to art school? So I trooped off to art school, and my mother accompanied me to make sure that I didn't say the wrong things. And the guy saw my folder. He said, you don't need to take the entrance test or anything. He said, your work is good enough for us to accept you. So I went off to Cambridge Art School, and I was there for 4 years. And the final exam, I was doing the National Diploma in Design, and I was doing the painting version. But during the exam, It was quite a long exam. You had a week where you had to draw and paint the model's life class. Then you had to submit a little thesis plus your sketchbooks and various bits and pieces you'd done on the course. Then you had your composition exam, which lasted about 3 weeks. So you're allowed to do lots of preliminary drawings and take them in. During that time there was a rail strike, so I was then cycling 50 miles a day. So anyway, and while I was cycling, somebody said, "Oh, we can put you up at the Trevelyan's," who lived at Trumpington, and his father was the historian, but he was a Cambridge Don. And they put me up and gave me a studio and everything. It was fantastic.
Really?
Place. And I stayed there for a while. And but anyway, when the results came through, I'd failed. And I'd failed on the composition, which I knew I was, because I hadn't done it. And the painting, which I thought was rubbish, went on tour.
Really?
Apparently. This is what I've been told.
With all those technical faults?
But not in the one with the technical faults I didn't complete. I thought I failed anyway, so I won't bother. And anyway, because of the circumstances, I was allowed to take the exam the following year, and they said they would give me a grant because obviously it had been very unfair, etc., etc. But by that time, in the fit of pique, I'd signed on in the army.
What, so you wanted to paint tanks instead?
Yeah, I thought, oh, I'll go and be a field marshal or something, and my demotion was very swift. I became a trooper overnight. And so I was in the army for 3 years, went to the Middle East and so on, Germany for a little while, and it was quite an interesting experience. I got trachoma in the Middle East and ended up in hospital. And then eventually it wasn't worth sending me back when they came out of the hospital, so they sent me to the Royal Military College of Science, where I could drive tanks on demos or whatever. And while I was there, the CO said, "Oh, you're an artist, you're going to art school, right?" And so they said that they gave me a day release course and a couple of evening classes to go to Swindon Art School.
And was that any good?
Yes, it was quite useful. And I met 3 guys there who eventually turned up at Chelsea. Now I'm in contact with one after 50 odd years.
Right.
I've discovered him again. So I went to Chelsea for a couple of years, and then I went on to Goldsmiths for a year, which is a part of London University, where I did a sort of teaching degree.
Right, so what drives you? What drives you to go, I want to do this? Or is that inner
I
nod?
suppose in a way it's obsessional.
Yeah.
Because if I go away, I think, well, what the hell am I here for? I should be painting at home, you see. And I used to be in the last place I lived at, I had a big window in the studio, I had a big studio there. And I'd look at it and think, oh dear, the garden, you know, needs doing. Better go in the garden and cut the grass, and I'd get guilt complex and think, what am I out here for? I should be painting. And if I go away after 2 days, I want to be back home.
Yeah.
Painting. I said, what am I over here for, wasting my time? If I'm in here sometimes, you do get painter's blocks, and you think, well, I don't know, I'm getting a bit repetitive. But I'm not really, I'm only interested in what I'm doing. I mean, I can understand why other people do their work. I mean, I suppose really there's no such thing as art, only artists.
Well, is a painting the product of art? And it is the...
But I don't know really what art is, unless art is, I don't know. It's, because everybody has some form of self-expression, don't they, I think. And I mean, this is why, I mean, I used to teach at one time, and but I think I'm more of a facilitator, because you've got to try and help to bring out what people have got. If you keep saying this is how you do it, you're really imposing your personality on them, and you're just producing little clones of yourself.
So are you saying that being an art teacher is a Zen thing?
Yeah, I think it's very difficult. I mean, I can remember working with one chap, and he used to say, oh, well, the kids or my pupils aren't terribly brainy, they can use mine, and I thought he was an awful artist. And the kids had to produce masculine, vigorous paintings. Right. And I said, there was one of his kids who he didn't want because he didn't think was any good. He was brilliant. He was so sensitive. I said to him, don't listen to anybody, let's just do what you're doing. You know, it was really beautiful, and I think if he'd have been in the throes of like a very forceful teacher, they'd have ruined him.
Right, there is that thing where it's almost like do your own thing, and those people who appreciate you will do so. There's no point trying to find an audience.
No.
You have to let the audience find you.
That's right. And if you think you're painting for an audience, you'll never produce a painting, because you've always got somebody looking over your shoulder. And and if you say you have a facility for drawing, you're just going to do a nice drawing, and you will stick there, and you won't experiment and push it further forward, will you? Because oh dear, they probably won't like what I'm doing. So once you start painting for an audience, you might as well pack up. You should paint for yourself, and hopefully somebody else will like it. If you want, if you're going into the sort of commercial side where you want to try and sell paintings, but really you should be painting for yourself.
Yeah.
And then somebody else may appreciate it, which is nice. If somebody else likes your work, it's quite flattering. But the point is, sometimes if you don't like your work and other people do, you think, they don't know what they're talking about. I mean, I used to be quite naughty when I was first an art student, because if my parents liked something, I think can't be very good, and I'd destroy it. Yeah, because I thought, well, they don't understand what I'm doing. But they did often. I mean, my father was very good. He used to, as a child, he used to get all these, he took me to the Tate a couple of times to see a Van Gogh exhibition and a Raoul Dufy exhibition. And he was very interested in art. And he wasn't bad himself, you know, drawing. And my mother was always interested. She was quite arty. But my father used to have lots of postcards, and he'd hang on and said, who painted this? I said, Rembrandt. Then he'd say, who painted this? Francisco Goya.
All right, so this was a test
Yeah,
or a
he
contest.
sort of had like flashcards. You get all these old postcards, and I was always interested. I was always drawing as a kid, and the only thing, and when they knew I was going to art school, when I was at grammar school, they put me in the art department for a couple of terms, because I was a lost cause. I wasn't going to university.
Right.
You see. And I lived in the art room. I really loved it, and the art master was extremely helpful. I really liked him. It's to my dying day that I've never really thanked him later.
Yes.
You know, and I did find eventually I did have a one-man show in Hitchin where I went to grammar school, and I found his address and I wrote to him, and I did say, you know, that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, sort of thing. But it's a bit too late.
Yeah.
Because you died not long after.
But you don't really realise when people are trying to facilitate you, at that point, you're so involved in what you're doing, you don't realise actually that people are being so kind and understanding, do you?
No.
It's only afterwards
That's
when
right.
you see the
That's
result.
right. Yeah.
So it's like it's like this big wave here. You're very much into the sea, and when you get an idea, you can't just stop at one thing, can you?
No, it tends. I mean, initially I loved the fens. I'm a sort of adopted fen man, and I like the sea because that's a liquid form of the fens. Although the fens are pretty liquid anyway.
Yeah.
The fens almost like what's the word? Atrophied sea. You know, I mean, it's where it's dead, isn't it? It's just a flat. And I know the sea actually gets mountains and waves in it, but I like this flatness, and I like the flatness of the fens.
Yes.
So I think I'm sort of divided between the two. I've been here for 8 years now, so I'm spending a lot of time trying to make notes of the sea, and perhaps I'm getting a bit obsession. I've got these little sketches here, which are based on the sea. And
I see you've got this one of the rain clouds over the sea.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then there's that's not this one here. Up here
Yeah.
is sort of the sea and sky.
That's right. But see, another thing is if you're looking at a canvas, I don't know, but if you're looking at a canvas is flat, isn't it? And one of the things you're trying to I can talk about depth and apparent depth and perspective, but the point is, if you're painting a void, which is the sky, in something which is solid, it still occupies the same surface on the canvas. So it should all become part of one thing. You don't think, oh, here's the sky and here's the sea. There's the sea and the sky, and it's all one unit. And if you take a section of it, then you have to try and make a composition of that section. I mean, the trouble is if you paint a landscape, we'll always have to alter it a bit, because it's almost like if you say, with a human being, you cut their arm off, I'm just going to do the arm and ignore the rest. But with a landscape, you're cutting a piece out, or a seascape, you're cutting a piece out, and from that piece, you have to make a unified composition which lives on as an entity.
Yes. Yeah, I see what you mean.
Yeah.
And you've got these bits on the wall there, and they're obviously like exercises
That's right,
in a continuing project.
That's right.
To flow through. But what happens when do you know when you've got to the end?
That's a good question. I mean, when do you know when you've got to the end of a painting? Because it's knowing when to stop, which is the most important thing. I mean, you can ruin paintings. I'm very good at ruining paintings. Well, I mean, if they're any good. I mean, if they're hanging up, I'll often go and add bits to them. So, I mean, you're probably losing the initial impetus because you see it differently each day.
Yes.
You feel differently. If you get up and you might do this is what I've said before, when you do a painting it can be very free and intuitive and have lots of life, but it lacks a structure. So you think, well, I better give it a bit more structure, but at the same time I mustn't lose that initial spark. So you can actually kill it. You can become very heavily constructed, but you lose all the initial vibrancy.
Yeah.
I can't think of the word at the moment. I used to use it regularly.
Right.
But
It's gone, has it?
Sign of galloping senility.
Well, so just to bring this to an end, we'll come back to the start. Is that what actually drives you? Is it just following the flow of ideas, or is it something of a Zen sort of thing where you just have to disappear into your own mind? I mean, what is it? Have you've obviously thought about this in the past. So what conclusions do you have that actually says, I do art, therefore I am? Or is there no answer to any of this?
Not really, because I'm still on the voyage, aren't I? I'll probably die before I ever come to a conclusion. Right. But no, it's a personal voyage, and you can agree with lots of people and what they say. I mean, there's so many different forms of expression that I mean, I can sort of say, oh, I think so and so's awful, but it might be very arrogant of me to say it's awful because they're probably going on their own personal journey, aren't they? You can only say painting is bad if it's, say, technically bad, but there again, you can only say things like blue and yellow make green.
Do they?
Yeah. Black and yellow will make a sort of muddy green. You can get almost a black if you mix alizarin crimson with viridian, which is a green, very, very dark, or you can get it with burnt umber and Prussian blue. And really, black is just a total exclusion of light. So I mean, there's no such thing as black, really, is there? Unless you're blind down the mine shaft.
In the bottom of a coal mine.
Yes.
Yeah.
But,
so what you're saying really is, there is no truth in art, and there is no reason. Art is just.
Well, that is an object, isn't it? That's an entity. That's something's done. I mean, no longer belongs to me, really, does it? It's something from the past. Something from the past
that gives an expression of a feeling.
How I felt at the time.
Yes. Yeah.
Dots like that, and then and then here, I have lots of dots here. I mean, this is a very long process, but if I put lots of dots here, and I'm cheating a bit because some of them aren't dots. If I do that, and I'm coming around, and there are lots of dots here, not so many dots here. I mean, if you allow yourself an hour to do this, you'll get something which is very convincing, and then we have it. You can already begin to see a ball appearing, can't you?
Yeah. Yes.
And there's no lines, because line is quite, there's no lines at all, it's quite an abstract concept, a line. I mean, in a way, I think drawing is the sort of purest form of art. and then if it's, let's say it's,
See, this, what you're doing now, of course, is just sharing information, aren't you?
yeah, and you're gradually getting a ball beginning to appear.
Yeah, and you have less in the middle.
Yeah, but that's the light. See, the light is coming here
Yeah,
now.
yeah. And this again, coming back to what drives you. You're just driven by
I love doing
exploring.
it. I just love it.
Yeah,
It gets very frustrating at times, and oh my God, well, you know, failure.
Yes.
But for every little bit of success, you probably have about 20 failures.
well,
I mean, I can knock out a painting,
yeah,
you know, so let's just knock out a painting, which everybody saw, that's okay, Mac, you know, I can see what it is, but it's funny when people say, what's it meant to be? You say, it's a painting. It's a painting. Well, what's it meant to be? And I'll say to them, what are you meant to be? You don't look a bit like a tree. And it's meant to be a painting, that's what it is. It exists as a painting. And it might have started off as an idea of a landscape, but really the thing that is the painting is the most important thing, isn't it?
right. So you start off with one thing, and you may not actually know what you're going to be doing.
No, it's a voyage of discovery.
Yes.
I mean, if you're going to do a landscape, yes, you know you're going to do a landscape,
Yeah.
but you're not quite sure how that landscape is going, unless you say somebody commissions you and say, I want this,
Right.
and then you're really an extension of what they want.
And would you take commissions, or do you just go?
I've done
no?
one or two, which I have quite enjoyed, some of them, because you're doing things that you wouldn't normally do, and it is another learning process. I mean, it's like when somebody would paint their dog, and I said, what colour do you want? But
do they not get a bit sticky?
but then I did this dog, and they brought the dog, and I did a quick sketch, but he gave me loads of photographs, which isn't quite as good to work from photographs, because photographs are flat anyway.
Yeah.
But anyway, I did this dog, and he said it's from a wife's birthday present, and he came along, and I said, well, look, if she doesn't like it, I'll have it back, you see, and we just called it quits. He said, oh, I love it anyway. So he said, I'm paying for it, because if she doesn't like it, I'm going to have it. So I said, fair enough. But I don't think I was prostituting my art, but I wouldn't say that I would call it great art. But nevertheless, I was satisfied with that. I achieved what I'd set out to do, and I'd actually put the dog in the field and change the landscape around it.
Would that be called craft then? Producing something for a specific
No, I did
reason?
a painting of a Lancaster bomber for a guy, that one here, which you can't really see. And I told him I wasn't an aviation artist, but unfortunately he's died now. He died of a terrible illness. But he bought it for his son's birthday, because his son is a fanatic on.
Yes.
And he loved it.
Right.
And then I said, well, I didn't charge him. I said, I'm not going to charge much because I'm not an aviation artist. When he saw it, he said, is it enough? And I could have said, no, it's not enough really, but I can't break promises.
No,
but,
exactly.
But I did that, then people keep saying, oh, why don't you do more of that? I said, well, I don't want to do more of it.
Exactly.
I mean, I might well be a petrol pump attendant. You know, I mean, once a thing becomes a chore, there's no point doing it, is there?
There's no expansion.
No.
Brilliant. Thank you,
right.
Mac.